Today, we're doing a really deep dive. We're going to zero in on just one single verse from the Qur'an, Surah Al-Aʿrāf, verse 27. And we're not just going to read it. We're going to perform a forensic analysis, dissecting the incredibly profound warning it holds for all of us, and the ancient story that gives it its power. Let's get into it.
O children of Adam, let not Satan tempt you, as he removed your parents from paradise, stripping them of their clothing to show them their private parts. Indeed, he sees you, he and his tribe, from where you do not see them. Indeed, we have made the devil's allies for those who do not believe. Wow. I mean, this isn't just some ancient story. This is a direct, personal, and urgent warning from God to every single one of us about a hidden enemy and a very, very specific strategy of deception.
So that brings us to the big question, right? What's the actual root of this temptation? What is the fundamental logic that Satan, the very first rebel, operates on? Because if we want to guard against it, we have to understand it. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Break it down piece by piece.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by really unpacking that divine warning. Then we're going to dive into a really critical concept, the difference between using your intellect versus following revelation. After that, we'll perform an anatomy of the deception itself and contrast that with the angels. We'll also tackle some of those big theological questions this story raises. And finally, we'll look at the incredible wisdom behind this entire cosmic test.
Okay, first things first. We need to get our heads around a foundational concept in Islamic theology, the difference between intellect and revelation. Honestly, understanding this is the key to unlocking the entire story of Adam and Iblis. It really is about knowing which tool to use for which job.
So in theology, you've got two main types of proof, or hujjat. First, there's the proof of intellect, the hujjat aqli. This is for things you can figure out with pure logic, like math, philosophy, the basic idea that there must be a creator. But then you have the transmitted proof, hujjat naqli. This is for stuff you can't figure out on your own. It's based on what's been revealed, like the Qur'an and authentic traditions. It's for divine commands, how to pray, what happens in the unseen, things where logic alone just won't get you there.
And this right here is the absolute crux of the entire problem. The very first moment of deviation in all of creation happened precisely because someone used the wrong tool for the job. God gave a direct, crystal clear command. That's a hujjat naqli situation. It requires one thing, submission. But what did Iblis do? He responded with his own faulty logic, a completely misplaced hujjat aqli. And that, right there, was his catastrophic, fatal error.
So let's put that flawed reasoning under the microscope. We're about to conduct a proper forensic analysis of the exact argument Iblis used to justify his rebellion. This is basically the blueprint for every act of arrogance that has ever followed. These are his exact words, preserved for all time. I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay. Now notice what he's doing here. He isn't denying that God is the creator. He's not an atheist. Instead, he's challenging God's wisdom. He's basically saying, I, with my intellect, know better than you, the all-knowing, about this command. The specific logical tool he tried to use is known in Islamic law as qiyas, which just means reasoning by analogy. And look, it can be a valid tool when it's used correctly by people who know what they're doing. But Iblis, he performed the very first and the most infamously flawed act of qiyas in history. Let's just break down this so-called logic. Premise 1. Fire is superior to clay. Okay, says who? Based on what objective standard? It's a completely unproven assumption. Premise 2. My origin dictates my worth. I mean, this is just pure arrogance. It reduces your entire value down to your physical makeup, totally ignoring things like a soul, knowledge, or the honor God bestows. And from these two completely garbage premises, he reaches his rebellious conclusion. Therefore, I'm better than him, this command is illogical, and I refuse to obey.
So the key thing to get here is that his flawed analogy, this qiyas, it was nothing more than a fancy excuse for the arrogance he already had in his heart. It was the exact moment that self-centered reasoning was placed above divine revelation, and that was it, the very first act of open rebellion against a direct command from God. Now, to really feel the weight of what Iblis did, you need a point of contrast. So let's turn to the other beings who were there when this command was given, the angels. Their reaction is the perfect opposite.
I mean, the Quran defines the fundamental nature of angels with this powerful statement.
They don't disobey what God commands. They just do what they are commanded. There's no debate, no second-guessing the wisdom, no trying to insert their own logic. Their very essence is pure, unadulterated obedience.
So let's dig a little deeper. Angels are beings created from light, and their absolute defining characteristic is this pure obedience. They don't even have the capacity or the free will to sin. They exist to be intermediaries, to carry out God's commands, and they're organized in all these different ranks and jobs, from the great archangels all the way down to the countless angels managing the functions of the universe.
In this verse just drives the point home so brilliantly. It says, "So the angels prostrated all of them entirely." The language used there in Arabic is emphatic. It's stressing complete and total unanimity. Not one angel hesitated. There was only one being in that entire assembly who refused, Iblis. His rebellion just looks so much more stark and lonely when you see it against that backdrop of perfect, universal submission.
Now, as you can imagine, this whole primordial drama brings up some really complex and important theological questions, and our sources tackle them head-on. So let's walk through some of the biggest ones and see what the scholars have to say.
Okay, first up, the big one. Prostration is the ultimate act of worship, and it's for God alone. So how could God possibly command the angels to prostrate to Adam, who's a created being? Isn't that basically a command to commit shirk, the unforgivable sin of polytheism?
And the answer lies in a super important distinction. The prostration wasn't an act of worship of Adam, it was an act of obedience to God. Think of it this way. Adam was the direction of the prostration, the Qibla, but the one being worshipped, the one being obeyed, was God himself. It was a test of loyalty to the one giving the command, not a test of love for the one receiving the prostration. All right, the next profound question deals with the infallibility of the prophets. The Qur'an is clear that Adam and Eve slipped up. So, if the very first prophet made a mistake, how can we believe that all prophets are infallible, or ma'soom, protected from sin?
First, let's just quickly define our term. Isma is the theological concept of infallibility. It's the belief that prophets are given a special, divine protection from God that prevents them from sinning or making mistakes, especially when it comes to receiving and delivering the message. It's a really core belief about prophethood.
Okay, so the scholarly answer here is pretty nuanced. They say that Adam's act wasn't a sin like we normally think of it, like murder or lying, something that would contradict his status as a prophet. Instead, it's classified as something called a tark al-Allah. This literally means leaving the better option. He had a choice between good and better, and he chose good. It was a lapse in judgment, a slip, not a defiant rebellion like Iblis's. And it happened in paradise, before his official mission on earth began, so it doesn't actually violate the core concept of Isma.
So, we've dissected the twisted logic, we've tackled the tough theological questions, but what's the grand purpose? What's the deep wisdom behind this whole cosmic drama? This final section is all about tying it all together.
Let's go back to the very materials Iblis used in his faulty argument. Fire, his origin, has all these symbolic qualities, right? It's associated with arrogance, it always rises up, it wants to be on top, it's destructive and unstable. And then you have clay, Adam's origin. It's associated with humility, with meekness. It's stable, fertile, it's what things grow from. You see? The wisdom in God's choice was embedded in the very nature of the materials themselves.
And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. This story isn't just some historical account. It is the framework for understanding our entire existence. It sets up the eternal conflict, the humility needed for obedience versus the arrogance of the ego. It perfectly defines our test here on earth, to navigate the whispers of that unseen enemy by holding tight to divine guidance.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to the verse itself. O children of Adam, let not Satan tempt you as he removed your parents from paradise. After everything we've unpacked, his methods, his preference for flawed logic, his appeal to our arrogance, this warning just hits differently now, doesn't it? It has a whole new level of depth and clarity.
So, this leaves us one final, and maybe most important, question. It's for all of us to think about. Now that we've taken apart the logic of arrogance and we truly understand the nature of obedience, how do we actually use this knowledge as a shield? How do we spot the echoes of Iblis's flawed arguments in our own minds and in the world around us, and consciously choose the other path, the path of humble submission? Because that right there is the entire test.